Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a couple's 12-year marriage unravels when the husband discovers his wife's affair with a new trainer at her gym. Confronted with evidence, he exposes the affair to her boss, leading to both their firings. Despite her pleas, he ends the marriage, gaining full custody of their children. She struggles to find work and lives with her parents, while he moves forward with their divorce. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I met in college, both young and full of dreams. Sparks flew instantly, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. Fast forward a bit, and we've been together for a solid 12 years. We have two beautiful kids, a cozy home we call our own, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. My wife has always been a bit of a health man. She is very passionate about clean living. She eats a plant-based lifestyle. She works out religiously, and she enforces a lot of these rules on our children so they can be healthy. I wasn't like that at all before we met. In fact, I grew up very poor in a food desert in America, so I wasn't used to eating organic fresh foods like she was. When we got together, I made some adjustments to my lifestyle, but there was a bit of compromise between us because I am unable to have a completely plant-based diet for my own health reasons. I work a mostly sedentary job in an office, though I do try to go for long walks or jog when I can. My wife, however, works as a personal trainer and nutritionist. She works at a gym near us that offers a lot of specialty classes for the members. She had been there for years. She was almost a staple of the gym to a lot of the older clients. I never had a reason to worry about what she was doing at work before. My wife was hot. I knew a lot of guys that came there to work out were probably hitting on her, but I trusted her. One day, she came home from work exhausted and annoyed. I asked about what was bothering her, and she told me that they hired a new trainer that was completely inept at their job. On top of her normal classes, they were having her train him on how to train others. It just seemed redundant, and she was pretty annoyed that they just didn't hire somebody who was capable. The first few days that she was training this new hire, she would come home and complain about how annoying he was, and how it seemed like he wasn't actually paying attention to her while she was training him. But sooner or later that complaining stopped. I didn't necessarily notice it at first, she just stopped talking about him. A few weeks after he started, we were at dinner, and I asked her how it was going with him. She seemed surprised that I asked, but she just shrugged it off and said that he's teaching his own class now, and sometimes she has to sit in on them to make sure he's up to par. It seemed like she started acting off just out of the blue. She was spending more time at the gym, she was wearing skimpier clothes out, and she was being distant and secretive. I had a feeling that there was something wrong between us, but I didn't know how to ask. As time went on, I only noticed things getting worse. So I bit the bullet, and I just outright asked her if there was something going on that I didn't know about. She laughed at me and told me that I was being silly for thinking something was happening. She loved me, and she wouldn't hurt me. It felt good to hear that reassurance when I had been somewhat insecure about our relationship in the weeks prior. For a few days, things were different, and it felt like she was being more aware of how she was acting around me. But then things just reverted back to how they were. I got really concerned when she told me that she was going to be teaching some evening classes at the gym. Ever since we had the kids, we had both been firm with our jobs about how we wouldn't be working anymore. Nights because we wanted to spend time with our family. We actually ended up having a huge argument about that because I felt like she had made a huge decision without me, but she told me that it was only going to be for a few months and it wasn't every night. So I just accepted it. She had been teaching that class for about 2 weeks. One night after she had made dinner, I noticed that she left her phone behind before she left. I told my oldest child to keep a close eye on the younger one so I could quickly run it over to the gym so she wouldn't be without it. When I got there, it was practically empty. There were a few other members on the machinery, but it was clear that there was no class taking place. As I said, my wife had been working there for 12 years, so I knew the workers pretty well. I explained to the front desk worker that I had my wife's phone, but they told me that she wasn't there. That seemed strange. She told me she had a class, so I believe she was there. They told me that they could have been wrong, but they hadn't seen her all night. They gave me the go-ahead to go look through the employee section. I walked back and made my way through the maze of lockers to find the offices and break room. I didn't see her anywhere there. It was clear to me then that she had lied to me about going to the gym. All of the feelings and worries had come back and I didn't know what to do. Then it hit me. I was holding her phone in my hands. I hadn't even thought about going through, but it was clear to me that I needed to. I looked through it and I found videos, pictures, and explicit details about her affair with the new trainer. I was absolutely shocked by what I'd seen. I had my suspicions, but confirming them felt like I was being stabbed in the chest. When I finally got back to my senses, I screenshotted a bunch of the messages and sent them to myself before deleting them from her phone. The closer I looked at some of the pictures, I could see that they had been sleeping together at the gym. My wife loved her job almost as much as she loved our kids. It truly meant the world to her. She had taken my happiness away, so I was going to take it for her too. I knew her boss, so I contacted him and told him about what I discovered. When I told him they had been sleeping together at the gym, he was disgusted. He was shocked that his employees would do something like that. I know it was a hasty decision to tell her boss before I even told her, but it was the right thing to do. I went back home and went to bed, intending to ignore my wife completely. The next day I got home from work and my wife was there completely distraught. She told me that she was let go from work. She told me she had no idea why, but I had a strong suspicion that if her boss fired her, they would have told her exactly why. She was clearly still trying to lie to me. I took that as an opportunity to elaborate on her recent termination. I told her all about what I had discovered and how I called her boss to tell him that they had been having a hard time having intimate at the job. She was shocked that I knew, but all I did was tell her that it was over between us. She begged me not to go through with that. She didn't have a job to support herself or the kids, and she didn't want to be without me. I told her that I'd made up my mind and that she wouldn't have to worry about supporting the kids because I was going to try to get custody of them. We ended up going through with the divorce. Both she and the trainer were fired from their job and forced to work elsewhere because my wife was fired for sleeping with somebody else on the job. It was difficult for her to use the only employment she had for the past 12 years on her resume. So it was difficult for her to land another one. Eventually she did, but it paid about 1/3 of what she was making before. I got full custody of the kids, and she has a dissertation of them every weekend, and she gets them on some holidays. She's living with her mom and stepdad now, while she tries to figure out a way to save money for her own place. Today's second story. In this story, Opie discovered his wife was cheating after noticing her odd behavior. Despite her elaborate cover-ups, he unveiled her affair and confronted her, capturing the moment on video. He exposed her infidelity on social media, leading to their divorce and his custody of their son. Determined to prioritize his son's upbringing, he's taking a hiatus from relationships. Now let's get into the story. I, 36 male, and my wife, 31 female, were married for 6 years before I learned something heartbreaking that destroyed our marriage. Before we got married, my wife and I were very good friends, and our relationship was strong because the organizations we worked for were on the same street, and we used to see each other all the time. But because I was always searching for greener pastures, I had to move to a different state where I still live. After I traveled to resume my new job, aside from my best friend and family, my wife was the only person that always called to check on me, and we talked on the phone the whole evening or chat with each other throughout the day. It felt great to know someone out there cared about me, and in no time, I caught feelings for her. After months of being apart, I asked her out, and since she was also single, she said yes, and that's how our love story began. Even though our relationship was more of a long-distance one, I still felt loved and trusted her so much. On my end, I tried to communicate with her as much as possible, and we took turns visiting each other on weekends or whenever we were free. After 2 years of our long-distance relationship, we got married, and she was forced to relocate and live in my state. Luckily, she got a job in her field, and the pay was great. She was also very passionate about her career, and she quickly climbed the ladder in her organization. It had to do with the extra professional certifications she got and her years of expertise. Marriage-wise, our relationship was great, and we were both happy, me especially. I loved her so much and did not imagine being with any other woman except her, and I believed we would grow old together. Initially, before we got married, we agreed we would not have kids yet because I didn't think I was ready to be a father, but after 1 year of marriage, I changed my mind. We talked about it again, and she was eager to stop taking her birth control pills, and fortunately for us, after a couple of months, she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy. The birth of our son came with an extra dose of happiness, and he even motivated me to work harder so I could take care of him. I even took an additional online job as a freelancer to earn some extra bucks. On the other hand, my wife did not need an additional job since taking care of our child was already working on its own, and I encouraged her to work very little and rest more, and I would take care of the rest. Eventually, after our son was almost a year old, she resumed work, and everything continued the way it was. The only difference in our lives was our son. Some months after my wife resumed work, I noticed she started dressing differently, which was unlike her. Before our son came, she never really cared about what she wore, and would literally wear anything as long as the colors were right. But after she resumed work, everything changed. The thing is, I did not have a problem with her dressing differently and being conscious of what she wore. I was more concerned with how the dresses made her look. For someone who has recently given birth, her stomach was visible through her tight clothes, but she didn't mind. She would even go as far as wearing glasses that would expose her brooms and something a little bit under her hips. I complained about her new choice of clothes and told her I wasn't comfortable with them, but her response was always, "I'm not wearing them for you. I'm wearing them for me," and she would leave the house in anger. It got so bad that we started fighting about it until I finally found out she decided to change her wardrobe because of how she felt in her skin. Indeed, her body had changed, and she added a lot of pounds because of her pregnancy, according to her. She wanted to look and feel younger, so she started dressing differently. Honestly, I felt terrible that I had been bugging her to stop dressing like a call girl, and I apologized and never mentioned it again. Meanwhile, our son was always with my wife, and we enrolled him at a daycare, where my wife would drop him off in the morning before going to work, and I would pick him up by 3 p.m. every day. One day I was supposed to go and pick him up as usual, but something came up at the office and I couldn't leave. So I tried calling my wife multiple times to inform her about the change of plans, but she wasn't responding. It was even some minutes past 3 p.m., and I didn't want her to think I had gone to get her son, whom I didn't. After waiting to see if she would return any of my calls, and she didn't, I called her organization to try and get in contact with her, but to my greatest surprise, I was told she no longer worked there, and she was sacked a few months earlier for sleeping with an intern. At first, I looked at my phone screen to be sure I called the right organization, and it was. It didn't make sense because my wife left home by 7:30 every morning, and most times, she would return late in the evening, because she claimed she did overtime. I was so shocked that I lost focus for a couple of minutes before responding to the person on the phone. I ended up asking a colleague of mine to cover for me, and I went to take her son home. When I got home that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what I found out. To even show how good she was at pretending, she would come home and still pretend to work on her laptop so I wouldn't suspect anything. So, eventually, she returned home that evening and talked about her day at work and all the things that happened. There were all lies, and I kept my cool, played along, and pretended like I didn't know she had been fooling me. That same day, before I returned home, I stopped by a store and grabbed one of those mini trackers because I was curious to know where she went every morning and returned late in the evening. The following morning, when I put her son in the back seat of her car, I secretly placed the tracker and kissed her goodbye. Immediately, she left the house. I started tracking her. As expected, she stopped first at her son's daycare, and from there, she went somewhere else, definitely not her workplace. She stayed there for several hours, went out, and returned to the same house. I tracked her for a whole week, and it was the same pattern until I decided to pay her a surprise visit one day. That day, she left the house as usual and even informed me she would be returning late. because there was an important project routine was working on. I called in sick at work already because I knew I would be showing up to her lover's house. Meanwhile, I had stopped by the house before to know the exact apartment she was going to, and I knew what her lover looked like. He was younger and opened the door to welcome her whenever she went there. When I arrived, I knocked on the door, pretending to be a pizza delivery guy. At first, I feared they wouldn't open the door because they didn't order pizza, but I was just dumb luck. Immediately, the young boy she was having an affair with opened the door. I pushed my way inside, and at the same time, my wife walked in on us snaked, and she froze. I was already prepared, so I was doing a Facebook Live video, and I recorded myself from the moment I left my car until I entered her lover's house. When she realized I was recording her, she tried to cover her face and run back inside, but she slipped and fell, resulting from her coming out of the bathroom. I know it is cruel, but I used the opportunity to record her well and say everything I wanted. It would be an understatement if I said I was only heartbroken. She literally destroyed everything we shared, planned, and even our son's life. That day, she didn't bother coming home because I warned her not to. I packed her things on our front porch, but she only came to take them a week later. As for revenge, I tagged most of her family members and friends on the live video I made, and she was so embarrassed. The comments were crazy too, and I'm sure she read all of them. Only enough, she never tried to beg me or explain. She knew it was over between us, which was very smart of her. She was smart enough not to bring her infidelity into her house, or else she and her lover would probably be limping for life. Anyway, we divorced, and with the help of a good lawyer, I won custody of our son. She left town when she could no longer bear the embarrassment from our townspeople, neighbors, friends, church members, and others who recognized her from the viral live video. Right now, I am the only parent our son has and looks up to, and I'm confident he's my son because I did a paternity test. As for love, I will be taking a very long break for now, and I'd rather focus all my energy on raising my boy properly and giving him a good life.